our session today is actually based on the session that we did for CIT last week about the T for Teaching podcast. But if people have specific questions or things that they want to know about, we can certainly get way off script. We're good at that.
As you can hear if you listen to any of the podcasts.
Podcasts are essentially digital audio files, usually a series, but it doesn't have to be a series, that kind of automatically download usually an RSS feed, essentially. So they are syndicated. You can get them as a subscription. So what's nice about it is that you can kind of get tapped into a particular podcast, get it on demand essentially, but also not have to go somewhere specific to get it, right? So you can use your podcast player.
And this one in particular will show up at 6 o'clock every Wednesday morning as long as I keep getting them ready. This last time was the closest to not being ready, but it was out by 3:30 or 4. Or it was posted by then.
No, you got up early to finish it.
Yeah.
No.
Or is that late?
I did. I got up early to post on the website.
Oh, yeah.
Which happened at about, 5:45 a.m.
And I was back up again.
So John, like what you might not know about our little podcast is how it got started. It's a fun little story. So John and I both had been kind of listening to podcasts, and then
More and more of them.
yeah, and while I was home with my daughter in her very early infancy, I was like, please, I need adults. So I listened to so many podcasts, and I remember during the summer texting John at Duke, like, what other podcast could I possibly listen to? Like, please, anything.
I listen to so many of them that I have to listen at double speed now. Otherwise, I get behind.
Yeah, I edit and just don't listen to them all. But these are some of the ones that we listen to that are related to higher education. But you know, we both have others that we listen to.
And we found
For
a growing
entertainment
number
or
too.
for professional development. There's a couple in design that I listen to keep up on design things.
And there's some economics ones I listen to.
So podcasts are asynchronous, which is really great for people who commute or who are very busy individuals, which I can't imagine any of you possibly are. Very busy, right? You
I
get them
am
on.
retired.
You're still very busy. You keep yourself very busy. They're on demand. You can get them by a subscription. And what we really like is that we can also provide show notes. So when something's mentioned, there's a list on the website of things that you can get. So if you like, oh, that paper sounds interesting or that resource sounds interesting, you can go back and get it and make snarky comments about it later. And
But at least we knew someone was listening.
and then also the transcripts. And we found that a lot of people are really interested in transcripts too, because if you don't want to listen to the podcast or listen to it double time, you can skim it, you know, and see if there's pieces that you're interested
You
in.
mentioned doing that. Gene Chambers mentioned that this morning.
Or search it too. So if there was something that you heard mentioned and you're trying to find that part, at least you can kind of jump to that section. So
Yeah, I find you sort of skim right along and then reread something you hear.
and there are some feature requests related to transcripts that I'm going to work on this summer.
You didn't put retired faculty on there.
Well, you're still teaching.
Oh, that's true.
I think we got that one.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things we were thinking about is that the podcast would be really good for our growing share of adjunct faculty, for people who commute. About half the faculty live outside the immediate area, and they have trouble making it to some of our workshops because if they're coming in only on Tuesday and Thursday or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they have pretty full teaching schedules, and it's hard for them to meet regularly, to attend regular meetings. And so we thought this might be a good way of reaching some of those. And then we have a little discussion of what we use. This is what we're using for our software. We use Adobe Audition to edit it, and that's part of the Creative Cloud. Yes, isn't it Creative Suite? No, Creative Cloud package from Adobe that we have on campus. We use Zoom for remote guests that we had tried Hangouts, we had tried Skype. The audio quality just wasn't quite as good with that. We use in particular Audio Hijack to take the output from Zoom and separate to record that directly into the recording. And we have our mixer where we take our side and mix it in. So the remote guests come in on the left channel, we're on the right channel, which allows us to edit them separately. And the nice feature about that is if we have guests either locally or remotely, and it's happened in both cases, who are doing things like this and rattling papers or tapping the table or thumping things or just bumping the microphone, it's really easy to edit out as long as they don't do it while they're talking.
Mhm.
So if we had guests here, we had one guest who had a big pile of papers that they were using for notes right next to the microphones.
Mhm.
So we asked her many times not to rattle them unless people on the other side were talking, because then we could just silence those parts. So it's a really nice package, and we'll take audio input from almost anything and redirect it to almost anything. And in particular, we just redirect it to a safe file. And you can run filters on it and do all sorts of other things with it. We use we get transcripts by uploading the audio files to YouTube, extracting the mechanically machine-generated transcriptions, and then spending many, many hours editing and cleaning them up. But it's 97 to 98% accurate when we have good quality recordings, and mostly we do. It's mostly just a question of identifying the speakers, that comes up later. Identifying the speakers and separating things into things that look sort of like sentences. And then they're posted on.
We use WordPress to host our site. So it was a custom theme for the site I built out. And I'm building out as people are requesting things, and I have time, but place to experiment. So that's what we're using as our CMS, but we're also hosting our specific episodes using Podbean, which is a service for podcasting specifically.
Mhm.
What's nice about that is that you don't have to worry about traffic overloads and things to your site, because the traffic's actually going through Podbean, and also that they automatically generate the feed to iTunes and all of these other.
So we upload it to them, and they share it with iTunes and so
Is
forth.
there
And
a charge?
there is. They were the best pricing. I think it's like $10 to $12 a month, maybe 15, something like that. But there's other ones that most people use. There's Libsyn, and there's Blueberry.
There's
and
a slide with that.
There's a slide with that. Okay, but those cost more. And they generally have a limit on how much you can upload in terms of time or in terms of space.
And
Podbean's unlimited.
if you're thinking about doing your own, like, you don't necessarily need a service like that. It does make some things easier, but the RSS feed actually isn't that difficult to write and generate. It's not that complicated.
But if you want to go to Spotify, only certain approved providers are connected to that.
I realize that. But there's also some free hosting services and things that you could use if you wanted to really like low level, low budget.
And Podbean even has a free version if you release less than 50 megabytes a month, or maybe it's 100. And this is our equipment. We've upgraded that in the last couple of weeks. We originally were using Shure SM57 mics, which are standard recording mics, but we had some problems with those. One was we had stands that looked similar to this, but they were direct connections where the mount was firmly connected. So whenever people tapped the table or bumped it or hit the chair or hit the microphone, it sounded like an explosion going off. And they'd often do that while they were waving their arms around while talking. And that was really hard to edit out. And often we'd have to ask people to either stop that. I wanted to get some straitjackets, but Rebecca didn't think that would help set the mood very well. But what we really need to do is get somewhat better audio quality. The other problem we have is, and this will come up a little later, but we had some noise issues. The reason we switched to these microphones is because they have a really strong proximity effect. They're large diaphragm. It takes a little more energy to activate them than other mics. And so as a result, when you're close to them, it picks up your sound really well. When you're further away, it doesn't. So it dampens a lot of the noise, so we're not having to edit as heavily for that, we're hoping.
So you might notice later in summer when the episodes that we've been recording with the new microphones come out, that the audio quality is a little richer.
And that should start in late June or early July because we've recorded ahead. And we have shock mounts here, which are those little round things around it. The microphones are suspended essentially like rubber bands that connect it. So it's not a physical connection to the stand. So it dampens a lot of the vibration. And we have a stereo mixer that we output.
I never thought of that being a problem.
We discovered that really quickly.
Yeah.
We thought people could sit there and talk, but it doesn't work that way with many of our guests. So you could do all this for virtually nothing. You could just do this from a smartphone or from a Chromebook or a laptop. You could just record directly into it and then upload it to SoundCloud or into Google Drive and then share it out from a web page. And you could use Audacity to do most of the editing. And Audacity has most of the basic features that Audition does. It doesn't have as many pre-built filters, but all the basic tools are there and you can do them individually rather than as packages.
It's a great entry level way of editing. So you may have heard a previous episode of the podcast that included Stephanie Pritchard as a guest, and she was doing some podcasting with her English 102 class, and they were using just the media recording rooms in the library, and they were using Audacity to edit them, and that quality is pretty decent. There's one group that maybe isn't as strong as the others, and you can tell that they didn't follow the directions, right? But in general, the basic level materials still can have a pretty good output.
I had used Audacity to edit some stuff from my band and my son's band, and it works pretty well. And as it's an open source
We
package.
use
So
it in design too. It's a good entry level.
these are the main podcast services. Podbean was the best deal.
Blueberry and
it goes
Libsyn
down.
are some of the really most common ones, and then SoundCloud is
It's a free
is
service.
free, but they don't have the same kind of subscription service available, so you'd have to embed it in a site or something. So if you weren't doing something that's a series that you want to have automated, that would be a good solution. Which is great if you're doing something with a class, perfect kind of solution.
Yeah, or if you just wanted to share it with a small group of people on a website or by an email list, that's fine. So these were our challenges. We already talked about most of those. The background noise is somewhat interesting here. There were a lot of noises we didn't notice. For example, the toilet flushing.
That's better now.
And that noise. And then you have a really big metallic cart that goes by at least 15 times a day when they're bringing food in or out, making deliveries there. It's not so bad now because they're shut down.
And in between classes.
And
Our lights had a hum.
we have a hum from the light. So I replaced the lamps that were in there. I put some LED bulbs in, and now we turn off the overhead
Now we
lights.
set the mood for our recording.
So now we don't have to edit out as much noise. And the refrigerator in the back has a hum. There was a hum that I couldn't figure out that showed up for 10 minutes at a time. And I was editing it syllable by syllable, and it was a real pain. Yeah, I heard it in the recording, but you didn't hear it while we were recording, I don't think.
No, I identified it though after you said what I was like, oh, that's the refrigerator.
After about 3 months of recording, 4 months of recording, we realized the refrigerator was the source of the random hum on our side. So now we turn the refrigerator off before a podcast and turn it back up after we finish. Editing, the first couple took maybe an hour or two for a 15-20-minute podcast. Now it's generally 20 to 40 hours. And it's partly because we got now a reputation for high quality sound, although the last one didn't sound as good, the one from 2 weeks ago, because there were a lot of pops on the line. But people, as I just did intentionally, say sometimes, or sort of kind of maybe wondering sort of whether this is maybe that's particularly true for our guests. I think we mostly stopped that. And
He says that, but yeah, he looks at me.
but we both, I think, become much more cognizant of that. I know how painful it is to edit that out. So whenever I say that anywhere, and whenever I say one of those things anywhere myself, it hurts because
I'm a lot more aware of doing it as well. It doesn't necessarily always prevent me from doing it, but I do notice it afterwards. It hurts a little.
and it hurts me too.
It hurts you probably more, but
It does, but at least when Rebecca does it, and even when I have a little noise in there. In the last podcast, I had to edit out 2 things I said. One was I said an and the other thing was I started to say something and then changed it to something else. So that was in an hour and 10 minutes of recording. One of our guests had about half of the sounds she made removed. Not no one from here, it was someone coming in remotely, because she had false starts on almost every sentence and then would restart once, twice.
Part of it
every
is
time.
just that as soon as someone knows they're being recorded, they just get nervous. And so
Oh, sure.
we have started developing some techniques to ease that. Mood lighting those.
Let's
We try to actually do a little bit of chit chat at the beginning, especially if it's someone we don't know very well or someone who seems really nervous. And I think that
It seems to help a little
helps a
bit.
bit. So
That's the bottom one there, John.
It's
I
just
put
so
that on there.
frustrating.
it's called T for teaching.
And probably 2/3 of our guests won't
Just
drink tea.
refuse to drink tea.
The worst one was Doug McKee, who runs his own podcast down
This
at
is
Cornell,
such a
the
great
Teach Better
story.
one. We were offering him tea all day. And then we get to, and he said, no, I'm fine with water. And then we get there and he said, I hate tea. Right at the beginning. He waited until we were recording.
He didn't know he didn't like tea until then.
He saved that one just for the recording. And it's in there, but
Allison, one of our frequent guests, is always drinking coffee or whatever. But watch for an upcoming episode.
but that's because she's the host. She's taken over. Someone was
Plot twist.
replaced. So
Moving right along.
moving right along, we're hoping, so in terms of where we think this is helpful, we're engaging faculty here, we're getting people here doing interesting things to share that with the college community and more broadly, which we're hoping might be good for them in terms of encouraging them to keep doing that and sharing what's going on on campus with all the people who might not otherwise attend workshops by people doing these things. And we're making them more visible in SUNY and now throughout the world.
It's nice to get that interaction between academic.
And we had some amazing interactions with people at other schools. Almost everyone we contacted off campus has said yes. There's one person who we're still talking to. We're trying to get a more definitive response. But everyone else, there was someone who had an article that was discussed on a few listservs at the Chicago School of Medicine. We contacted him and he said, sure, he'd be happy to. We contacted someone from Furman who had an article in the New York Times and so forth. There were some people, well, we contacted someone, Christina Mitchell at Texas Tech, who had an article in the Chronicle last year and who had an article in Salon and other places. And she was thrilled to do it. So now when we ask people on campus, it's not so positive. But we've been able to bring it.
We've had plenty of guests from campus, but
We
I think
have.
what's really nice is that we've had a good balance, so that by not being all SUNY Oswego folks or even SUNY folks, and having a good mix, it really does like elevate our faculty, which I think is really a really nice way to help faculty get out there.
We're mixing in people here with some people who are nationally and internationally
And
known.
connecting some of them too, like we've met people that have some really, similar interests in faculty that we know here, and connect them, which is nice too. Just thinking of like Renee getting involved in your Fact 2 thing or whatever.
That's right. We had some of them join some of the SUNY Fact 2 councils based on what they were presenting and tying interests together. So we're available on iTunes, Google Play, Podbean, Stitcher Player, FM, Spotify, and pretty much every podcast service out there now. We now have 31 episodes and a teaser episode. There's 32 releases. On average, we're up to 127 downloads. A week ago, that was 101. It's grown dramatically.
We have a CIT phone / Barbara,
It was amazing. A week ago, we had 50-some countries with listeners. Now we have 71. We're stuck at 48 states. We can't find anyone in Montana.
Oh, but we do also have the District of Columbia and U.S. other.
So we got 49. So we have some territory, U.S. territories.
Wow.
That would be my guess. Probably Guam, Virgin Islands, and we've got a number of people from there. But and so far we've had 19 SUNY Oswego guests.
That's good next year.
Well, of all the ones that have been released.
And then we have more coming up.
Yeah.
And we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Tumblr. You didn't know about Tumblr, did you?
No.
We get posted there every week too.
Oh, great.
Good.
So that's it.
And what do you do in your spare time?
It's been tough.
Troubleshoot. John edits.
Well, I like the response you got at CIT there.
It was amazing. It was just amazing. Just to show you the response, we've got that right here. Stop that. We've got that right here. And
You like
this
that
is,
I had that up for you, didn't you?
it is. Well, I would have put it up. I saw it was there.
I know.
So these are our monthly downloads. Here's our first month. We only had one thing then with 15 downloads. Then this was the month of November. We had 133 with 4 episodes. Then in November, in December, we had 349. And this is, again, monthly downloads, not total. So we've grown every month. And then we have January, February, March, April, and then all of a sudden it doubles, more than doubles. And that all occurred in the last week or so. We had the
And
Chancellor.
David Parisian is like an all-time star.
And yeah, if we look at the actual totals
This
here,
episode has a lot more downloads.
he has 535 downloads for his episode. So these are our top ones. The main difference is just how they've been publicized and how well known the people are. So his was sent out in an email from Barbara Oakley on her Cheery Friday email to people who had taken her MOOC. She has over 200,000 people in her MOOC, which begins every 4 weeks. So, and a lot of those people subscribe. So when that went out, we had about 350 downloads in the space of a day, which, you know, if we look at the daily downloads, you'll see the difference. Let's go here for the last 30 days.
This is John's favorite part of this one.
This is what we were averaging on a daily basis until last Friday when her email went out, and then look at that. It's just amazing. So, you know,
Now there's like no pressure or anything.
so it has raised the pressure a lot, because now, while most of the downloads were of that, many of the people then downloaded another episode or 2, or all of them in some cases.
Now there's a little more high priority of like, could we please have an outline ahead of time? Can we do a preview interview before we do the actual interview?
And now we're getting
So
some
we're
people.
doing some of that now.
The interesting thing now is people are coming to us and asking to be on the podcast, and
Now we need to.
now we need to, yeah. But if you look at the downloads, this is all time. If we look at it more recently, it's much more global. But 79% of our downloads are from the US. The other 21% are from the rest of the world.
Mhm.
But now if we narrow that, say, to May, look at what happens. We're down to 63% US. And if we look at it in terms of the US here, overall time is probably the best measure of that. New York only accounts for 50% of our downloads, of our US downloads. So we're getting a lot of downloads from the rest of the country.
Like our friend Michelle Miller in Arizona.
Yeah, she's been pushing it. And she's also mentioned it in keynote addresses in Florida and many other
And
places.
our friends at Texas, because we did a few interviews there.
So yeah, I'm amazed at how it's caught on. We've gotten really good feedback about it.
Also, you two have your own TV show on, you know.
Basically, yeah.
The nice thing about this, though, is we get the ability to edit.
Can I tell my favorite story from CIT?
Sure. Uh-oh. I
This
don't
is
know.
so great.
Go ahead. Now I'm apprehensive.
So we do our presentation at CIT. It was like first thing in the morning on Thursday. And then I had to, people came up to me like 15, 20 times throughout the day. Like, really like the podcast. And like, you have really good like synergy with like whoever it is that you're like doing it.
And meanwhile, I'm the chair of the seat.
I have never been to CIT before. So I would tell John every time someone came up to me, like, another person I don't know came up to me, John. They don't seem to know you.
I know.
John who?
Well, except I was up on the stage, I was giving presentations, I was introducing the keynote, I was introducing the SUNY provost. So I'm anonymous. Oh, a related point. On the Friday before that, I was giving a workshop and a member of our music department was attending. And he mentioned, oh, do we have someone?
Yeah, Dan is on here.
Okay. Oh, hi, Dan. If you have any questions, just jump in. A member of our music department actually thanked me at the end of the first workshop we did that day saying, you know, I really enjoy those podcasts that you're sending out. Those two hosts that are doing that do a really good job.
Well, that's nice of you to send it out.
He wasn't joking, but yeah. So, you know, he didn't make a connection between our
Oh, you
names.
didn't finish the story.
Oh.
You recognized my name.
Well, he said he thought Rebecca sounded familiar, but he's from your school. But see, I'm so quiet. I don't send out any emails on campus or anything. And, you know,
You just white noise, John.
apparently.
I just found the whole thing really funny.
Well, and your name was listed on the presentation too, so your name was more associated with it as the.
I recognize that. But that's because you had so many trying to not stack the deck.
My name was on the pre-conference workshop, yeah. Yeah, I was in like 20 sessions, very nice.
I was in 2.
But this is the one I was most looking forward to.
Because you wanted the CIT book.
No, that's impressive.
What I really like though is to have some people the more people from the college listen.
Yeah.
Because when I look at the IP addresses, we're getting a lot from Buffalo, a lot from Fredonia, a lot from Ithaca, a lot from New York City, a lot from Long Island, Farmingdale, and Westchester. Not so many from Oswego or Syracuse.
I remember reading something, and the fact is, if you travel, you become an expert.
Mm-hmm.
You're not an expert at home. You know, I mean, I think that's partially true.
The last one that I was listening to with Allison Rank and
Heather Poole.
Heather. I think at least components of that should be required for faculty.
Their paper is really great, actually. If you,
And
it's a quick read.
I will definitely read it because it's, you know, a lot of these have great content in them, and I think just from a general morale standpoint, it's good to listen to. But they had not only concrete things about writing, but they had that sort of revelation bit that I think is absolutely transcendent of discipline. That is, we give our students these writing assignments and we give them these writing prompts, and we never really think about, okay.
They're not seeing it through the same lens as we do. You know?
And I am just as guilty.
Allison gave a workshop on that yesterday.
When?
Yesterday.
I could have seen it.
But she's had over 100 downloads of that so far. So people are listening.
The paper is really good, though. It has a lot of the stuff in that workshop.
And as always, it would be nice to be able to reach all faculty and not just the keen and eager.
The choir.
Yeah, the choir.
But I think
We do have some people.
we're getting notes from people who I don't generally see in
That's
workshops, which is nice.
And mostly the people commuting from Syracuse
Yeah.
or Rochester and so forth, and they're spending a lot of time driving, so.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I think sometimes it's difficult to do that stuff during the semester. You know, that you might have more headspace for that if you're traveling during the summer or what have you too. You know,
I
you
mean,
can't always listen to stuff in their commute in
I
or
mean, if
out.
you have a family along with everything else.
Yeah.
Put a half hour aside sometimes. I mean, you run these things off and watch on 30, 40 minutes, you're all done.
You're good. But we're to your point though, like we're trying to actively make sure that we're kind of focusing the recordings now, like more so, to make sure that they're kind of really highlighting evidence-based practices or, you know, like certain things so that there's some recurring themes. And so when people are coming up to us now, like we're taking the time out, it's like, okay, like kind of interesting what you're doing. How would you connect it to some of these other principles? And if they don't have an answer right away, it's not a no for the podcast, but like maybe.
How might we reframe this to
Yeah,
make it
like-
more productive?
Or maybe do you want to think about this a little bit more and, help us make those connections.